The 2025 standard format rotation has officially been announced. The Pokemon trading card game, which means it's time to dig a little deeper and figure out what's going on and what our biggest losses are. The 2025 standard format rotation. If you are not already aware, the standard format rotation will take place on the 11th of April 2025 for real life, and if you are playing on TCGL, it'll take place on the 27th of March. Our standard format will rotate to G on. That's going to be G, H, and I. So everything from Scarlet and Violet onward. Now, as for the biggest losses for this rotation, there are actually a decent number of losses. We have a fair number of honorable mentions we're going to talk about first. And first, for those honorable mentions, we have Dark Patch, Collapse Stadium, Gift Energy, and B-Barrel. Yes, somehow B-Barrel has made it to the honorable mentions page instead of the top 20. For whatever reason, B-Barrel's usage has drastically fallen off recently, which is why it brings it all the way down here to the honorable mentions. This top 20 is largely based on data from the last 2-ish months, roughly almost 3 months of Japanese tournament data. So this will be mostly reflective of what our format will look like when our format rotates. So with that said, B-Barrel, for some reason, more or less a no-show. It does have some representation, obviously, but not nearly as much as it had back in its heyday. Collapse Stadium, also very welcome card in the format, so it is a little sad to see it leave, but it's likely we'll get some sort of bent control card here in the future too. And our first big honorable mention here on its own is not really an honorable mention in the traditional sense. It's almost more of a dishonorable mention. Giratina V-Star does manage to fall off in the format in Japan. However, here in the United States and internationally, it is quite a dominant force still. Very, very popular. Regidrago V-Star kind of wearing out its welcome, and at just the perfect time, frankly. It is about to rotate here in April. So it and all of its buddies, its best buddies at least, its Baby V, the Giratina V-Star, Gudra, they're all going to go with it. In addition to Regidrago V-Star making the honorable mentions, or dishonorable mentions if you must, it's going to get this year's Good Riddance Bronze Award. This card managed to be around most of the format without being much of a nuisance until maybe the last 6 months or so with Shrouded Fable's release. But it got to be pretty annoying all the same in the time that it was especially active. So it gets the Good Riddance Bronze Award. Up next, another honorable mention here that is more of a dishonorable mention is Lugia V-Star itself, with its partner in crime Archeops with that Primal Turbo ability. This deck, especially when it first released, was an absolute nightmare, rivaled pretty much only by Arceus Dialga Palkia GX and Mewtwo EX from back in the day. This card had everything it could possibly want and then some. It has fallen off drastically since. Pokemon has been extremely careful about the special energy and possible support Pokemon that they've been printing alongside the format, but this card, it may be a lower force now, but it was definitely it was a torture when it was originally out in the format, which is why, in addition to being a dishonorable mention, it is also the recipient of the Good Riddance Silver Award. Now, something you're going to notice, all of the Good Riddance Awards this year are going to be given to honorable mentions, and that is because Pokemon has had a much better time keeping track and getting a hold of the formats and keeping them more under control over the last couple of years. And with the cards they printed, they've managed to balance the formats out considerably more than they had in the past. Do we still have the occasional very clear best deck in format? Absolutely we do. But compared to Lugia's heyday, Mew VMAX's heyday, or Arceus and Dialga and Palkia's GX's heyday, there's not anything at that level. Speaking of which, our last dishonorable mention is going to go to Lost Box as a whole. It's Comfey, Cramorant. He may be my favorite Pokemon, but no. Sableye in particular, I think, is my least favorite of the bunch here, but also Mirage Gate, which is a problem in and of itself. These cards made for some very interesting gameplay if you were the person playing them. for some rather disinteresting player if you were the person having to play against them largely, just because you were waiting around so much for them to do whatever they wanted. But the deck did offer something for players who had very high skill under their belts, and for that reason, I guess it stuck around for a very long time. It took Kyurem in particular to take it out, to take it down several notches, and to ultimately push it out of the meta to the point where it barely sees results anymore. But it was for quite some time just an absolute torture also in the meta. Very, very flexible, very, very efficient at all it needed to do. And that is why Lost Box is the recipient of the Good Riddance Gold Award. We can finally say good riddance to Lost Box and welcome whatever our next big torture is. But for now, goodbye, Lost Box. You won't be missed much. With that down, with all of our honorable mentions out of the way, it's time to get to the top 20, starting with number 20 itself. Irida is an amazing card, very much like Corina before it. Corina obviously did fighting type Pokemon, Irida water. Either way, this card was extraordinarily flexible, one of the most versatile cards as a supporter. And there's just something about this type of supporter that it's very deceptively powerful. I know in his review of Astral Radiance, Andrew Mahone was not very much a fan of Irida before its release and had to change his tune once it saw play. I had, at that time when I saw his review, I was aghast because my friends and I had already started testing it and we're like, no, trust, this card is incredibly good. It's very deceptively powerful for the effect printed on it, but this goes to show sometimes you gotta get your hands on the cards, and cards that don't seem incredibly powerful initially, they can be crazy powerful. One of the ones that I failed on, of course, was a card that rotated last year with Battle BIP Pass. That was a much more powerful card than I had anticipated. Up next, after Irida, is number 19, Duskull. This Duskull, of course, allows you to conceal your deck a little bit compared to the other one, where you're able to show this psychic type Duskull and basically keep it so that your opponent is not quite aware which deck you are playing now. You're just going to be playing the Duskull that you can play. It's just going to be the one from Shadow Fable. This one also had the advantage of being actually somewhat useful in psychic decks. So if you had basic psychic energy in your deck, you could take advantage of Perplex, for example. But now you just lose this option entirely. At number 18 is Curia and its refinement ability. Just like Trade before it, this ability was absolutely incredible, very, very powerful, and allowed for some very beautiful gameplay, frankly. Gardevoir is very much going to miss Curia, and it's going to be interesting to see how Gardevoir survives without Curia, if it does at all. Gardevoir is going to have to adapt drastically if it will survive at all. And I'm not sure that it can. Its ability is extremely powerful, but Curia is a huge part of what makes that deck work. At number 17, we have Radiant Alakazam. With the Painful Spoons ability, you'd be able to move damage counters off your opponent's active Pokemon, making it so that you'd more effectively get those 2 shots in, while also making use of the extra damage that you would be piling up on their active Pokemon. Radiant Alakazam is just a super good card, and this is actually one card I'm kind of sad to see go from the standard format because it's just so flexible. It's not super overpowered at the same time. Super good card. At number 16, we have Trekking Shoes, also known as Acro Bike with a flat tire. I loved this card. My friends accused me of trying to shove this card into basically every deck I built for the longest time, and to a large degree, they weren't wrong. It's just one of those cards that it kind of makes things work, and if you had the deck space, it was super fun to just shove in there and get the deck moving a little faster. But it is going also, and Acrobike is not going to save the day. We just won't have anything like this in the format with rotation. At number 15, we have the Lie herself, Roxan. Roxan, of course, a disruption card that lets your opponent draw just 2 cards after going down to 3 or fewer prize cards. And Unfortunately, Roxanne largely got usurped by Ino. Ino just basically meant that Ino is basically just the more flexible, more useful version of Roxanne in a lot of ways. Yes, they had largely different effects, but Roxanne fell off a lot in comparison to Ino, simply because Ino was useful for more of the game than Roxanne was. At number 14, we have Temple of Sinnoh. Temple of Sinnoh is one of those cards that's just really cool because it's just kind of techy, and when it works really well. This was a card that I think was printed ahead of Lugia to try to keep it in control, or at least keep it in some degree of check, and it failed catastrophically at that. But it has proved to be a good element of the meta all the same, shutting down things like double turbo energy, shutting down things like legacy energy. This card was just one of those cards that made the matchups better where they needed to be made better and got out of the way when it didn't. Temple of Sinnoh, you will be missed. At number 13, there is Switch Cart. Switch Cart is Switch Plus. This is a Disney Plus subscription in a card here. Switch Cart, it's a Switch, but for basic Pokemon only, and you can deal damage. This is one of those cards where at a glance, it's like, well, that's not good enough. There was a Switch Raft for Dragon Majesty that saw basically no play because it was too niche. And this card looked initially like it would be in that same realm. Turns out when you have a bunch of basic Pokemon in decks, this card works out to just be kind of better than Switch because it does the same thing. But if your active Pokemon was damaged, you get to heal it off. Super good card. Goodbye, Switch card. Here is number 12, and one of my first actually sad moment cards from leaving the format here. Rotom V's instant charge was very much a toning down of Zacian V's ability, Intrepid Sword. And it was really balanced for what it was. It helped stage 2 decks set up. You know, turn 1, they'd throw stuff down, throw Rotom V down, draw some extra cards to help set up turn 2. It also served as a vehicle for Steel Stone. It kind of was just one of those universally, all right, this is all right cards. This is fine, right? This is going to make things okay. But now it's going away. It's leaving the format, and we're gonna have a Rotom V-shaped hole as it leaves. Canceling Cologne. Canceling Cologne is kind of a menace in its standard, but a real menace in Eternal when it gets to be used. This is just one of those cards that makes some very obnoxious plays possible. Pulling that Manife into the active spot, turning off the Manife, double sniping their Pokemon, just shutting their entire board down. Canceling Cologne made it possible to just ruin your opponent's day. And Radiant Greninja, of course, was drinking all the Canceling Cologne it could, but it's gone, or at least it's going to be leaving in April. So we can wave goodbye to this one. At number 10 is Radiant Charizard, and the first of the Radiants to appear in the top 10 here. Radiant Charizard was insanely flexible, and its only real downside was its bulky retreat cost. It had good HP, good attack damage, an amazing ability that made its attack much more manageable. Radiant Charizard was just super strong and super versatile in its day, and continued to see play throughout its entire run. Was it as popular as another Radiant on this list coming up later? No, but it was probably the second most popular of the Radiants in general. At number 9, we have Thorton. This card sneaks into an odd number of decks, let me tell you. When you have a bunch of basic Pokemon, you can make Thorton do weird things, whether that's turn a Rotom V into a Dreepy, or turn a Manife into a Charmander. Thorton just makes some very useful plays possible, gets your liabilities out of play better than even Collapse Stadium can, and makes it possible to recover Pokemon in ways that wouldn't otherwise be possible. It's a weirdly flexible card that even as a supporter card was definitely worth playing in some decks. So, you know what, Thornton? Well played. You will actually be sad to see you leave. At number 8 is a card that a lot of people left out of their decks when they probably shouldn't have, and other people kept in their decks when they probably shouldn't have. And that's Manife, the recipient to the sniper shot that was canceling Cologne oftentimes. Manife's Wave Veil, as of the recording of this video, does not have a replacement in the standard format. Wave Veil is an ability on a basic Pokemon that says prevent all damage to your benched Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. At this time, there isn't a benched Pokemon, or a basic Pokemon rather, that can do something to that effect in the standard format. We have a similar Pokemon as a stage 1 that also protects against damage counters or effects of attacks. I can't remember which off the top of my head at the moment, but it's just not the same. And it does have to evolve up in order to exist in any sort of useful capacity. So Manife going away is kind of a bit of a oh no moment for a lot of people, myself included. But it's possible the format lives fine and goes along without it, without much of a hitch. It has been interesting to see the designers kind of tone down the amount of sniping in the format over the last year or so, and most of our sniping cards that have any real oomph to them are ones that are already also leaving the format. So Heavy might not be too bad. At number 7, we have Double Turbo Energy. This card leaving the format, I'm glad it's leaving the format. I don't think Double Turbo Energy was especially healthy for the game. I don't think it was especially bad. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't think it was the worst thing to be in the format. I'm a person who prefers Twin Energy's philosophy over Double Turbos, where I'd rather have this double energy exists for non-prize box Pokemon. But all the same, Double Turbo Energy allowed for a lot of very interesting plays, both for non-rule boxes and for rule box Pokemon. It made a huge variety of decks possible, or just good in general. Things like Hisuian Zorg, when it got a chance to be okay for like a day. The Reggies, when they were around and popular. Greninja EX, obviously, when it pops into decks here and there. It's just one of those cards that finds its way into a large number of decks and just kind of peeks in, and it's like, look, I'm here. It also worked very well with Arceus V-Star, which of course is the set it was printed for. It was a good card. It was not my favorite in terms of its existence, but it was also a very useful card for the format. So with its leaving the format, we will no longer have a double energy in the format. It's been a while since we've had no double energy in format, since before Rebel Clash. So it's been a while, but we get to say goodbye to Double Turbo Energy. Up next is Lost Vacuum at number 6. I don't know how to feel about Lost Vacuum leaving. We have Jamming Tower, which is very much supposed to be a pseudo replacement for it, right? It's doing something similar in that it is able to shut off the effects of the tools that your opponent is using, which is good in a lot of situations, but maybe not enough in others. It can be bumped fairly easily, and some tools are just a little on the good side. Pokemon is printing a card, a supporter card, unfortunately, that is supposed to kind of help push this card. Pokemon is printing a supporter card that is supposed to make the loss of this card not sting quite so much. We have a card called Ruffian coming out in Journey Together that will also discard a tool and a special energy card from one of your opponent's Pokemon. But it's a supporter card, not an item card like this, which makes it feel Lost Vacuum was just really, really good, and like Tool Scrapper and Field Blower before it, having this kind of power on an item card has proved super potent for the format, and frankly kind of necessary for some decks. So it will be interesting to see how the format moves forward without it. Maybe Ruffian will become better thanks to a future print of a card like Versus Seeker. Who knows? Obviously Versus Seeker is not confirmed. Probably not going to happen because I want it too much. Pokemon wouldn't do it, but we shall see. At number 5, we have Pokestop. Pokestop has been in a crazy amount of decks lately. Lots of bigger basic decks like Raging Bolt just love Pokestop, where you're just churning through your deck, pulling all the items out as fast as you can. The big tool errata made Pokestop slightly weaker, and yet it still has continued to see a ton of play because of just how much it's able to do in the format. With my luck, of course, I hit 3 supporters or 3 energy or a mix of the two and never hit the item cards I want, but all the same, Pokestop has made a lot of people very, very happy as they dig through their deck, getting those item cards out of those top 3 cards. At number 4, and frankly one of the best cards in this format, this is the computer search of this format, if you will. The card that just said, you know what, get a card out of your deck. You know you want it. It's Forest Sealstone. Forest Sealstone leaves with all the V-Stars, and goodbye V-Stars, you did what you needed to do. But it's... seeing this card go was a little crazy, because even though it was very much a get whatever you want out of your deck card, it was also a card that made some decks possible, right? It made stage 2s more consistent. It made it possible to get your wombo combos off as a bit of a combo heavy deck. And it made the single prizer decks that could run a V more consistent. Every deck just loved Forest Sealstone and being able to take advantage of it. And for a while, it got super crazy expensive. It's just one of those cards. It was good, really, really good for its time. And it is going to be sad to see Forest Sealstone go, but I do very much look forward to seeing how the designers handle Stage 2 decks, especially going forward without Forest Sealstone. At number 3 is Hisuian Heavy Ball. Surprisingly, at number 3 instead of number 4, where maybe Forest Sealstone could have taken a spot instead. But Hisuian Heavy Ball has just seen so much play. So much play, more so than even Forest Sealstone. This card in so many decks, almost always is a one of, just like Forest Sealstone actually, but just the ability to go get a basic Pokemon out of your prize cards, get that 1 of 3 Dreepy, or that 1 of 2 Score Bunny, or whatever the card ended up being. It just made decks run a little bit smoother. It made them feel a little bit more confident about having smaller basic lines, and that is going away. There is, of course, a card that's meant to kind of make it feel less bad that this is leaving the format, right? We have Exchange Ticket coming out and Journey Together, but it's not the same effect, so goodbye, Hisuian Heavy Ball. At number 2 is one of my favorite cards in the format, Luminan V. Luminan V, of course, has that luminous sign that lets you find a supporter card from your deck, put it straight into your hand. An extremely powerful ability, and has been very good in basically every format it's been printed in, with Jirachi and Tapu Lele, and to a lesser extent, of course, Lapras. The card effect is just so strong, and it kind of saw a big resurgence toward the end of its lifespan here. For a long time, Luminan V was just kind of a no-show, but it popped back in as a way to use for Sealstone. It popped back in just because finding the supporter you really need for a turn is crucial for some decks. Yes, it's a squishy 2 prizer with 170 HP, but it is a darn good card, and I am sad to see Luminan go. I don't know how long it's going to be before we see another ability like this one in Standard, but I do hope it's not too long. And now the card that nearly got the Good Riddance Gold award, stealing it right out from underneath Lost Box. This card is the strongest card in the current Standard format. It snipes, it draws cards, it retreats for 1, it's just stupid overtuned, and it was the most popular Radiant by a landslide. You know what card I'm talking about. It's Radiant Greninja. This card needs to go. Frankly, if any card could have been banned in Standard currently, this card definitely could have been a contender. It's just so strong with all of its tools like canceling Cologne and Prime Catcher and Palkia. There's so many extremely flexible, extremely potent, extremely early game ways to make this card an absolute nightmare for so many decks. Radiant Greninja, also, of course, a late game nightmare in many decks. This card was just super powerful. This will be missed. Don't get me wrong. I'm giving it crap because it was so incredibly powerful and frankly format warping, but I will miss it too. The concealed cards ability is just insanely good. This is gonna be a card to miss, let me tell you. Radiant Greninja is going to be one where we have to go, you know what? I can't put that in my deck anymore because it rotated. So what do I do now? Anyway, that is my number one. That's largely, of course, data driven. What card do you think you're going to miss the most come rotation in April? Is it going to be Radiant Greninja? Is it going to be his Hisuian Heavy Ball? Heck, maybe it's the Lost Zone Engine. Maybe you really like making people wait while you Comfey 5 times in a turn. I don't know. Which card is it? Let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to learn more about the 2025 standard format rotation, you can do so at justinbasil.com via the link in the description. Anyway, that's everything for today. Hopefully you enjoyed. I will see you in the next video.